Welcome to Silicon Valley Health Institute, not anymore formerly known as Smart Life Forum because we've been Silicon Valley Health Institute for a while now. So I'm Robert Minkemeller. I'm one of your board members. I've been into health and nutrition since 1989, been a nutritionist since 92, so one of my passions, and it's a real honor to be part of the board here at Silicon Valley Health Institute. I've been coming about 16 years myself, so. Any first-time visitors? Ah, fantastic. Welcome. We hope that you'll come back and see us every month. We have great lectures and great information. We record all of our videos, so you can go back and look over them, and you can see all kinds of videos from over the last 20 years, probably the last 10 or so that we've been recording them or so. But there's tons of videos online, tons of great information. We're a 501c3, and so we rely on your donations and membership. If you come anytime, it's $10 at the door, or if you pay for a year, it's $60. So that's how we operate. So we appreciate you guys coming. Cell phones, please silence your cell phones. If you're concerned about EMFs, feel free to turn them off. If you have any emergency calls, please take them outside just for respect for our speakers as well. Try and keep the noise down. The location of the restrooms. If you need some exercise, just down the hallway about 100 yards and to the left about 100 yards. And the restrooms are on the right there. So we'll have a break and an intermission about 10 to 9, between 10 to 9 and 9 o'clock, roughly around there, depending on how the talks go. And does anybody have any announcements they'd like to make? Upcoming events or any other information? Okay.
Okay. Dr. T is in the Bay Area for one day tomorrow. We have skin clinics. If you still would like to have an appointment or see him for any other reasons, come to me, I help you. Also, if you would like to go with him foraging in August, that's a possibility, 4 days of foraging. I have a flyer there where you can read more about what this is all about. It's in the Wisconsin area somewhere. And if you want to go with him even on a bigger trip, you can go in October to Nepal. Maybe he will tell himself a little bit more about that. That's a true adventure and supports his humanitarian mission for Nepali children. That's it.
Yeah, just to elaborate, the Nepal trip is a humanitarian trek. So if you go with me, you will see a lot of aspects of Nepal that you normally wouldn't see. And you will also visit some of the orphanages that the organization I work with has built. And you will see the schools and you interact with the children. There are a lot of amazing experiences, but the most important is that you will be visiting places where no Westerners have ever visited. You will be going to at least one village that has never been visited by a Westerner or a foreigner. You'll be the first. So that's very exciting. About Nepal. And the foraging, there are 11 lectures on different aspects of health as it relates to nature. Because you are in nature when you forage, and you eat only what nature provides for 4 days, you learn a lot. And you interact with nature in a way that you wouldn't have a chance. Anybody could lecture to you about nature, but the best is to actually be there and experience it for yourself. And don't worry, we don't eat only what we get in nature. We supplement it with some other things to avoid mental and physical trauma to some people who can't handle the idea. So everybody will be taken care of. Nobody comes out hungry from those 4 days. And people just fly into Minneapolis, and then we drive 1 hour from the Twin Cities to Wisconsin to an amazing piece of land where we go foraging and tube in the river and do other things. So it's a lot of experiences all at once, and like I said, 11 different topics are being covered with regards to nature and health.
Okay. Any other announcements? we have a sister organization, Foundation for Mind Body Research is at Unity, meets on Fridays. So I think we have some information in our newsletter on that meeting as well. So, okay, so we usually start off the forum here with questions from you guys. So we're recording on video your questions and make them available for people as well afterwards. So does anybody have any questions regarding health? Here we go.
Okay, I'm looking at getting my teeth replaced, filled dental implants, and I was wondering what people's opinion on that was.
Steve, you have anything on that? That's a pretty, oh, Dr. T?
Yeah.
Okay.
Planning to have your teeth replaced, meaning implanted?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so first of all, the implants should at least be on the surface zirconium or ceramic instead of titanium, because you don't want the metal in your body. Generally, the holistic dentist would use the zirconium or ceramic approach entirely. Today, I found out that there is actually a type of implant that has titanium inside and zirconium on the outside, so that might be sufficient for some people. Of course, you'll have to wait several months at least until the bone density increases after you pull out a tooth before it's ready to do that. So you'll have to go through a process. If you want the healing to be more effective, you want to go to a dentist who will be able to remove not just the periodontal ligament, but any decayed tissue surrounding it within the adjacent bone, so that the healing is more complete and the implant will be more successful in general.
I think it's a really, really big rule never to have more than one metal in your mouth at any given time. So if you're going to have a metal implant put in and you have other metal fillings in your mouth, you need to have them removed. Because anytime you have two different metals in an electrolyte environment, you have a battery, and that causes one of your metals to degrade. And so you end up with a higher order of toxicity from that. The other thing that I would suggest is, in terms of the healing rate, you're dealing with both mineralization of the bone and collagen formation in the bone. And that I would suggest that you look up the pathways for those and treat them nutritionally. So for example, mineralization requires vitamin D and vitamin K, D3 or K2 supplements as a way of optimizing the integration of the bone with the implant. Collagen is also involved as the protein structure in the bone to make it tough and resilient, so it's not brittle. And all of those are important metabolic processes for healing, and you can heal much, much faster if you push those processes nutritionally. And one of the former members here did that for a hip prosthesis and recovered faster than anybody else in the history of Stanford's hip replacement process. So it is amazingly effective. And if you have any questions about that, see me at the break.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're working with a biological dentist, but one of our members, Dr. Sue Kong, has spoke here before. She's in Sunnyvale. And then my dentist is in Santa Cruz, Dr. David Biles. So you can work with them and they can kind of test some of the compatibility things there and help you along those lines too. Okay. Any other questions?
Regarding the implant, if you had to have a choice of doing implant, zirconium or partial, which would you choose if you had to do it?
Sometimes you don't have a choice. It depends on the density of your bone and the depth of the root that can be utilized. It depends on the height of the gum line and the location of your sinuses. So it's really hard to tell if you'd even have an option to do a really good implant. But if you have the option to do an implant, then it's an issue also of finances. You know, implants are expensive. If you can afford them, then ultimately they will offer you a more natural sense of chewing than a partial, which, you know, obviously is not the most comfortable thing in the world. You have to get used to it. You have to clean it all the time in a different way, take it out, put it back in. So not everybody has the option, but if you do and you can afford it, an implant is probably a better option in the long run. And you can do it at any age unless the bone density is insufficient. And there are many cases where it is not sufficiently strong, and then you have to maybe exercise your jawbone significantly for a long time to try to increase the density.
Some dentists also do a process or a procedure to inject T cells to grow new bone, and they find that that's very helpful, especially if you have bone loss in the area you need a implant. I had that done, and I've had no problems, and it's been very successful.
Okay, any other questions? Things that are going on with your health that we might be able to give you some answers for? No? Steve, hold on.
So I have asthma, so the condition kind of like sometimes gets better, sometimes actually worse, and then so I just wondered that what kind of diet I can do or what kind of thing I can actually get it better.
Asthma? Yeah. I've had quite a few clients who've dealt with asthma, but more that have dealt with migraine. And there's, eczema. Okay. It turns out that I just reviewed a website, solvingeczema.org, that brought up the issue of skin integrity as it relates to, in some people, the use of detergents as skin cleaning agents as opposed to soap. For the last, several hundred years, our skin cleaning has been soap-based. We take fat and we mix it with lye, and it breaks it down into fatty acids, which are basically soap. And this is somewhat alkaline and a bit traumatic to the skin. It likes to generally be acidic, and so people have been having some degree of skin irritation from the soaps, and that has provided an incentive to move to surfactant-based soaps, actually skin cleaning agents, that are pH neutral or even slightly pH acidic to match the pH of skin. It turns out that the choice of what you use to clean your skin can strip away lipids and alter the permeability of your skin and make it susceptible to all kinds of things that you would otherwise not react to. And this is often a situation that shows up in children, it's a bit awkward because there's so many different things in our lives nowadays that can do that we don't normally think about. So for example, when you do laundry and you wash your clothes in a washing machine with a detergent-based cleaning agent, there's a residue that's deposited throughout your clothes. And there's same thing happens if you use a detergent in your dishwasher and you wash your dishes and use one of those sheeting agents like jet dry or things like that, which is basically a detergent-based product that causes the final rinse to sheet onto your dishes so that you don't end up with spots. But you do end up with a layer of detergent all over your dishes. So every time you eat, you're not only exposing your skin to the detergent, you're exposing your interior skin, your digestive system, to those detergents. And it alters the permeability of your membranes throughout your body, and that can result in a variety of skin conditions. That detergent residue is so tenacious that you have to wash your clothes in a detergent-free washing machine 10 times in order to get that detergent off of the fibers in your clothes. So sometimes you can tell when you have eczema or other skin conditions, rashes and stuff, that are at contact points with your clothes. You know, neck, underarms, waist, where you have the fabrics, you know, rubbing up against the skin. And so if your eczema is located in those kinds of tissues, I would suspect, I would, you know, be more inclined to think that it's a detergent-based kind of issue. But even a detergent, I mean, it's like, I knew one family that did a soap-free, I mean, a detergent-free protocol, and they switched and they washed all their clothes and all that, but they didn't change their shampoo. And putting detergent in your hair and then having it rinse down over your entire body completely you know, destroys the purpose of going to back to soaps. So that's one of the aspects to consider, is that issue of membrane permeability and skin breathability. And I know that if you corner Dr. T, he can also give you advice about that.
Do you want to make a few comments?
In general, the word eczema is a very catch-all phrase that refers to inflammation of the skin without specific cause. So there are many potential causes. Some of them Steve talked about, and others relate to the diet. Very, very commonly, people who just attempt, you know, just as a guess, to avoid gluten or to avoid dairy, and, you know, suddenly they have improvement. Then it's really important to look at the whole picture and see what else could be causing your skin to be inflamed, and also to look for other symptoms, because inflammation in the skin can be associated with inflammation somewhere else. An immune reaction could be simultaneous in your brain and in your skin, in your gut, you know, in your nervous system, elsewhere. So you have to look at the whole picture instead of just looking at the skin and its specific symptom in order to do your body justice. Don't just chase away the symptoms of one condition. Look at the whole environmental input that is affecting your immune system and the immune complexes that are causing the inflammation. It could be a complex story, and it's necessary to be investigated thoroughly. It's an opportunity to avoid other diseases that are far worse than just the skin.
There's a lot of radicalization that's happening in terms of people's association with medical institutions and doctors and the use of drugs and, you know, their relationship with allopathic medicine. And you know, most of the alternative doctors that you seek out, or complementary doctors or functional medicine doctors, orthomolecular doctors, have gone through a process where something about what they learned in medical school failed them in some way. We've had Len Saputo here, for example, and his wife almost died at one point from delayed hypersensitivities to foods. And it's not unusual to see a medical professional say to you, it can't be food allergies because we've done this comprehensive IgE panel on you, and you didn't react to any of them. When there are IgA, IgG, and IgM antibodies that are delayed hypersensitivities that produce similar kinds of reactions, only instead of them happening within 30 minutes, they rarely happen in that time frame and happen over the course of days and weeks. Typically 6 to 8 days would be a kind of normal cause and effect time frame. And how many of us remember that when we have a rash, what did we eat 6 to 8 days ago? It's just not going to happen. So for those of you here for the first time, you may run across all kinds of ideas that you may never have heard before. When I gave a talk on mechanisms of Alzheimer's disease to people at Google, I was dealing with Googlers who had come to Google Mountain View headquarters from all over the world and had no idea that people could be reactive to gluten in wheat or corn or milk. And when I suggested those kinds of things as potential, the inflammatory response to those kinds of foods as being a potential causal factor in the development of Alzheimer's disease, they were scandalized. Part of what I'd like to say in terms of the message here is that when you're dealing with the medical profession, it is, in a sense, a guild. And the doctors are educated within a system that's dramatically funded by drug companies and pharmaceutical interests. And they're given a piece of the health puzzle. And the piece that they're given to the greatest degree is one of symptom control. You go, you present with a particular symptom, the spectrum of symptoms is used to diagnose you, then you're given a drug to block the symptoms, and then you walk away happy. And that really does a good job of serving the drug companies, but it really doesn't help get to the cause of things. And those are often very simple things like skin permeability. You know, how does your skin breathe? Membranes, how resistant are they to permeability, and how or are they excessively permeable? And those kinds of aspects of things are basic physiological needs that would be analogous to air, you know, water, gravity, electromagnetic fields that are pervasive around us, that are involved in our health, but we ignore them like we ignore air and fish ignore water. It's just there. But when you start to pay attention to those kinds of things, it may sound crazy, whimsical, you know, that you're nuts and you're, you know, just a typical California wacko that, you know, talking about this kind of stuff. But it turns out that these things are very, very valuable. It's like going back to basics, and if you go and take your car to a mechanic who says, oh, don't bother changing the oil, you know that's not a good mechanic and you want to take your car somewhere else. But if you don't educate yourself about these kinds of things, then if you follow the advice of a doctor, you may get into trouble where you're not considering part of the equation that they're not considering as well. So I like to take it back to the fundamentals of physiology for people, that in terms of, let's say, top-down regulation mechanisms of health and bottom-up regulation mechanisms of health, that from a top-down perspective, you start with your mind, your spirit, your happiness, your sense of being alive and motivated, and you look forward to waking up in the morning as being the highest level top-down influence for your health and your well-being. And below that would be your neuroendocrine system, your hypothalamus and your pituitary, and all these feedback loops that are regulating this high-level neurological function to what's going on in your body. Are you tuned into your body? Is your autonomic nervous system working the way it's supposed to? And from the bottom-up perspective, it's not just about nutrition, which are all the bits and pieces, the gears, the bolts, the nuts of how the machine works. But on top of that is metabolism, which is the dynamic function of all those parts with each other. And, you know, the medical profession is getting better at that kind of thing now. Instead of having my father, for example, when he went through medical school, he got a day of nutrition. 4 years, 1 day. Now they get a week.
And that's a great improvement, you know, because you can eat a lot in a week. Just one thing that to complement that, but you know, I like to show people both sides of the equation. You know, when we're dealing with human beings, we are also dealing with the tendencies of human beings to simplify things, to jump to conclusions too quickly, to ignore scientific rigor when it's convenient to their belief system. There are a lot of problems also with the holistic field. And many times you can go to a functional practitioner, functional doctor, medical doctor, who has made the switch towards holistic thinking, but they were educated not by a legitimate source of information that is science-based, but by a laboratory that taught them what test to do. And that's the only source of information for those doctors, and therefore they don't have necessarily the tools to analyze whether that lab test is valid or not. And especially in the realm of food sensitivities, when you look at various antibodies like the IgGs and IgMs and IgAs, it's so important that all the labs would have exactly the same assay substrate, that they will have exactly the same type of food that they are actually testing one against the other, and they don't. Therefore, many times you cannot rely on those test findings. And even the same lab will not agree with itself on the same split sample, on the same patient sometimes. And one lab will tell you that you're reacting to 10 various foods, and another lab will say totally other foods that you react against. Luckily, many times those foods include the big ones like gluten and dairy and eggs and soy and corn, and in some cases chocolate and sesame and citrus. And people, as a result, whether the lab was correct or not, the result is that they treat themselves correctly because they avoid one of those foods that happen to be a problem for them. And they had a friend who told them that it worked to eliminate gluten, so even if the lab did not say gluten, they avoid that as well. And then they think that the lab was necessarily beneficial or valid or accurate, and it's not the case. Things are improving in this regard, but we still have a long ways to go with regards to applying the physiological, biochemical parameters to actual people. There's still a long ways. And with regard to skin, we're making a big advance. I lectured here about this about a year ago or so, about skin science. It's probably available on online on the Silicon Valley Health Institute channel. So if you look at the SVHI, okay. SVHI's channel, there is a lecture I gave here about the 3 main skin layers, and each one of those, how you analyze it with instruments, you may have seen that, how to analyze the exact functionality and the representation of each of these skin layers to the rest of your body. You know, just like Steve said, the membranes, the transepidermal water loss, and also the moisture level of the living epidermis and the elasticity of the deep dermis, all of which indicate a lot of things about the general health, because the skin is a living tissue that represents the health of your entire body. So if something happens to your skin, imagine that it is affecting the rest of your body as well. And it's so important to find out what it is, rather than just to guess. Okay.
We're running a little bit over here, but we had one more question on radiation.
Hi. I have to go back to Tokyo next week, okay? And then it's still, I'm Japanese, don't know about how dangerous Fukushima is. And then if somebody can share about, how to deal with radiation, and how to detox, because I have to go back to Tokyo 1 week. It's not so far from Fukushima. If somebody can share some, information now.
Can you give her the quick version, Steve?
It's not actually, in my opinion, the radiation really isn't anything to worry about. It's the radionuclides that are what you should worry about, the radioactive elements. So radioactive cesium, radioactive iodine, those elements can go into your body, and your body thinks of them as being nutrients. They're incorporating them, your body's incorporating them into your bones and into your thyroid gland. And then when those radioactive elements break down and emit their radiation, it's deep in your tissues and it causes a severe amount of local damage. So that's the concern that I have, and when I when Fukushima went off, what I did is I started taking iodine, non-radioactive iodine. And I started taking cesium, non-radioactive cesium. And what that does is it just washes out any radioactive cesium that I get exposed to and any radioactive iodine that I get exposed to. So that would be my strategy, is to take supplements of those radioactive elements like, you know, potassium, whatever might be there. Also, I would look at the wind and ocean current patterns to know whether or not the stuff is blowing your way. Because if you're 100 miles away, upwind of the reactor site, you know, it's all blowing over to California and not on the other side of the island and towards, for example, China.